as somebody who has disabilities myself, I had to learn and become aware of when I had some ableist beliefs that I wasn't even aware of that was impacting how I related, not just to other folks, but also to myself. And so these ideas about how we compartmentalize people and who gets privilege, who gets the matter in our societies apply regardless of what group I'm in.
Cue music. Places, everybody, places. We're starting in 3, 2.
Welcome to the Autoimmune Hour, where we look at the rise of autoimmune disorders. I've brought together top experts that range from doctors, specialists, nutritionists, researchers, and even those recovering from autoimmune to bring you the latest, most up-to-date information about autoimmunity and how to live your life uninterrupted.
Thank you for joining us here on the Autoimmune Hour with Sharon Sayler. Always seek sound legal, medical, and or professional advice regarding any problems, conditions, and any of the recommendations you see, hear, or read here on the Autoimmune Hour, Understanding Autoimmune, and Life Interrupted Radio. Join the Autoimmune Hour's Courage Club. Sign up now at understandingautoimmune.com. Now, back to your host, Sharon Sayler.
Welcome, everyone, to the Autoimmune Hour. I'm Sharon Sayler from SharonSayler.com and UnderstandingAutoimmune.com, where you can have over 440 plus episodes, I think we're at now, of the show. And it's my honor and pleasure to be with you here tonight. And I have a fantastic guest. Now, a couple of weeks ago, actually probably more like a month ago now, we had Sarah Payton on, and you know how much we all love Sarah Payton. And she talked about her new book called The Anti-Racist Heart that she co-wrote with Roxy Manning. And I know we foreshadowed Roxy being able to join us. She's just been out there interviewing everywhere, doing her massive, wonderful work, all sorts of things. We finally snagged her for our show. I'm so excited to have her here. So let me quickly read her bio and then we'll introduce her. Roxy Manning's life experience as an Afro-Caribbean immigrant to the U.S. combined with her academic training and professional work as a licensed clinical psychologist and a CNVC, nonviolent communication, certified trainer, have cultivated her deep passion for work that supports social change at the personal and interpersonal and systematic levels, that supports social change at the personal, interpersonal, and systemic levels. She is a psychologist based in San Francisco and an assessor for CNBC, and she's delighted to help opposing voices hear each other and sees past individual hurt and struggles that we all have in communicating. So you can explore all this and more over at roxymanning.com. And she's got 2 books out. As I mentioned, she and Sarah Payton wrote The Anti-Racist Heart, and you can check that out like I said, about a month ago. You could check out that interview I had with Sarah. And Roxy also wrote the How to Have Antiracist Conversations. And one of the things that Roxy and I were chatting about was like, it's not just anti-racist, it's sort of like anti all sorts of things, right? So welcome, Roxy. Thanks for being on the show.
Oh, I'm so excited to be here. Sharon talks so well about you.
Let's have fun. Now, what prompted you to write the book? I love the book.
I've been doing this work for quite a number of years now where I'm trying to help people feel equipped to have conversations about racism. And it's not a one-off thing. It's like I can go into an organization, I can meet with someone, I can give some coaching, but what people really needed was a way to kind of dive deep, to do a slow examination of some of these concepts, to reflect on how is it showing up in their lives, and to keep revisiting the work. And so the book was a really great strategy for that. Instead of just engaging with this in the moment when I'm in front of you, people get to slow down and really reflect on all of these concepts for as long as they need it. They get to notice where they're having barriers inside of themselves that are preventing them from having these conversations. And especially with the Anti-Racist Heart book, work through some of those barriers, do a lot of the exercises that helps us unpack it. So I wanted folks to have both the knowledge, the skills in how to have anti-racist conversations, and then support in noticing where are the blocks in applying those skills.
Oh, absolutely. And you know what I love about books, even if I've been to someone's workshop or seminar, is I can go back. There's just no way I can take it all in one session.
Yes.
I always find I have what abouts afterwards. Like, okay, it applies here and here and here. What about?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
That's important for me to always be able to reflect on the what about. And so I know you've been interviewing just massively and things like that. What are some surprising things that have happened to you since the book's come out?
I think one of the things that I'm just so moved by, and it's like truly, it's been healing for me in a way, is how the books are being received, especially by people of the global majority. And I wrote the books partly for folks in the global majority, partly for white folks, right? I wanted to make sure that we can support people on all identities and having these conversations. But I also shared a lot about myself in the books. I share some personal stories. I share some of my struggles. And I'm hearing from people how much what I wrote matched their lives. They're like, I'm seeing myself in what you wrote. I'm seeing the struggles I had in what you wrote. And it's been healing for me. And so having this clear sense and feedback from people that this is actually shedding light on parts of our experience as global majority folks that are not often seen or heard or discussed, and that it's contributing to release. It's just so meaningful to me. It's been a dream.
I wanted to just ask a quick, maybe a tangential off-base question, but what I'm curious about is oftentimes, though, to me, it's not just white versus the global majority. Oftentimes I find different groups have different feelings about each other that aren't productive or helpful at all either. And I know your book can be applied to just if you're having different groups who can't seem to get along.
Absolutely. And, I can look at this question in a number of ways, but when I think about the books, like I focus on anti-racist conversations, but in a way I do that because the system of racism that, got set up decades, centuries ago now, is a system that has bled into so many different ways of how we relate to each other. So this idea of who's being centered, whose concerns matter, is something that applies to me whether or not I'm a person from the global majority, whether or not I'm a person with a disability, whether or not I'm a person with this gender that's been marginalized in our society. So all of these ways that we oppress people because of their racial and ethnic group are also tools that we use to oppress people with other identities. And I find that we all have internalized some of these beliefs, and then we apply them to the groups that we're not part of. So I know that as a person who's cisgender, one of the places where I've had to do my own work is to look and see where some of the ways that I'm relating to people who are transgender is maybe not the way that I would want to be, right? That it's actually replaying some of these oppressive ways that we work at people. As somebody who has disabilities myself, I had to learn and become aware of when I had some ableist beliefs that I wasn't even aware of that was impacting how I related, not just to other folks, but also to myself. And so these ideas about how we compartmentalize people and who gets privilege, who gets to matter in our societies apply regardless of what group I'm in.
Oh, well said. I love that. I'm going to put that transcribed up there. That's fantastic. I know that when I got diagnosed, I lost 60% of my skin, and a lot of it was in the face. And so it was the first time where going out in public, I frightened people. Now, I knew that, and I'm sure there all sorts of thoughts went through their head, like, is it contagious? Probably was the first one that came through their head. That was an interesting awakening for me. I have to be honest. That was one of the first times where I felt like, oh my gosh, I am actually making people uncomfortable just by my presence.
Mm.
And so I'm curious, when we feel like that, I wasn't sure how to say, hey, it's okay. I'm not scary. I mean,
Yeah.
it looks scary, but I wasn't sure. I was really left at a loss on how to talk about it or bring it up in a conversation. Do you have tips on how to bring up, like, hey, let's just talk?
One of the things is to just be really transparent, and it takes a lot of vulnerability. So you have to be comfortable yourself in naming this thing. And I would just actually name it for the people. Just say, when I meet people for the first time, a lot of people are curious or even sometimes a little bit afraid about what it means that I have this appearance. Is it a disease? Is it contagious? What does it mean for their safety and well-being? And I'm happy to answer any questions you have. And just name it and invite curiosity.
Oh. Now, I'm not to make it minimized, but Roxy, you make it sound so easy. Is that because you're so comfortable doing? You just have done it so many times, it's becoming very comfortable.
It is. And I think that's important for people to know that when I say something, it's like I've been thinking about and doing this work for decades now. So of course I'm going to say it and it's going to be fluid. And it's so important to name that this is not a disability I have, right? And so I'm not worried about the impact. So it's easy for me to say, here's how I would show up. But when I'm actually living that experience, when I've had to deal with people's expressions of aversion or hatred or disgust, then it's a really hard thing to say because I'm not just thinking of what can I say to include this person? I'm also having to unpack and hold myself with a lot of compassion. And so I always tell folks, whenever you have to speak up about these things, give yourself some grace. Acknowledge it's going to be hard. Acknowledge the vulnerability of doing it. That for me to talk to somebody about something related to race, it's still vulnerable. It's still vulnerable to say, hey, what you did impacted me. It was hard for me. And to trust that they're going to care about that. If I don't even trust that you're going to care about it, I'm putting myself out there not knowing how I'm going to be received. So it's going to be hard, but we still get to do it. We still get to try and practice and practice and practice.
Oh, wow. Okay. I'm just thinking of the number of times where, as a white person, I've said something that I thought was just normal conversation and someone else took it wrong. I want to know how's the best way to apologize when my lack of knowledge or whatever, I don't know what it would be. I hope it wasn't from a harmful place, is taken in a way that wasn't meant to be. What are some things that people can do when they realize they've just stepped in it?
Yeah, love that question. So here's my first coaching tip. It would be don't say the phrase, they took it wrong, because it implies that I said something that was perfectly normal and they're the ones who have a problem. They're the ones who are too sensitive, right? So you can imagine.
Yeah, I think I feel it. Like I realize I said a phrase that maybe is normal in my world, where or maybe it's really a bad joke or something. I don't know, but my curiosity is about when all of a sudden I can see the surprise or the hurt or the shock on their face, and all of a sudden I'm like, oh my gosh.
I love what you just said, right? Because when you talked about what I'm noticing, you're taking ownership yourself, and that's where I would start. So you could say, wow, I just saw what I'm reading as surprise or shock or hurt on your face, and I just want to check, is that what's going on? And if they say yes, you could say, I'm not clear what it is that I said or did that stimulated that, and I would want to know because our relationship matters. And then pause and let them speak. Now, the hard part is that somebody might say, nope, not going there with you. I don't know you enough. I don't want to take that risk. How do I know it's not going to get worse, right? And if someone says that, it's okay. I always tell people that what I'm doing is I'm opening the door. And if you choose not to walk through it, there are really good reasons why you might say no. How do I know it's safe through that door? And that's okay. You get to say no, but just opening the door lets the person know I'm interested and I'm available. And if they do walk through it, if they do say, yeah, actually, I was shocked, I was hurt, I can't believe you said that, it's to really stay focused on their experience. Because all too often we go to, wait, you didn't understand me. That's not what I meant. Let me explain what I meant. And then that's centering you being understood and known, rather than really staying focused with what was the impact for you when I said that? How did it land in? What else did it connect to in your life? Like, even if I didn't say that, even if we both agree that I misheard you, in the moment that you thought I said that, something got stimulated for you that was bigger than me. And I would want to know that because that was painful. So it's just making sure that you stay focused on that person's experience.
That's beautiful. I'm also thinking how that could relate to people with disabilities as well, because oftentimes people are trying to be helpful and sometimes their help is actually more impeding.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. I could see how that would also be helpful.
I think so. And it's, when I think about someone with disabilities, like one of the classic images that comes to mind is this piece around like, okay, if someone who is blind is trying to cross the street, don't go up and grab their arm without permission, right?
Think about if somebody grabbed my arm and I'm sighted, I would freak out.
Exactly.
If I couldn't tell what just grabbed my arm.
And just imagine how much worse it is when you didn't even see them coming and all of a sudden there's a touch on your body, right? Yeah. So it's like if someone says, wait, stop, I don't need this. It's really important to realize that even if maybe they didn't see that there was a car like just swooping by and they could have gotten hurt, and once you explain that, they'll be like, yes, that made sense. the pain and the shock they're feeling in the moment is bigger than this exact moment. It's like I'm feeling pain and shock because first there's the startle of who is this person and why are they grabbing me and what meaning it is. Then it connects to all of the other times people have grabbed me or done things to my body without my consent with the assumption that I needed it, that I'm not capable, that I'm somehow less than. And even if that's not what you meant in the moment, those memories are activated and I'm having to deal with them. So give space for the person to deal with everything that got stimulated, not just what you intended.
Right. I love that. And don't defend yourself.
Don't defend yourself. Yes. Yeah.
I'm writing that down too. I'm underlining so many things when I get this transcript back.
I want to add one thing about the don't defend yourself part, because a lot of times people hear don't defend yourself and think, well, I could never say what my truth is, right? And what I often say is it can be actually really helpful to say, first, give the person space to be heard about their experience and what's true for them. And then afterwards, when they feel heard, you can say, I have some extra information about what I was trying to do that I think would be helpful for you to know. Would you like to hear that? And if they say yes, then you tell them. And the reason why I think this question can be really helpful is it helps us to start to rewrite the stories, right? So when I'm taking this example that I had about a blind person who was grabbed, if I just left it at, you grabbed me, you are assuming that I cannot cross the street when I've done it, how do you think I got to this corner by myself, right? So, of course, that's an important thing to hear and to help them notice what's coming up when they believe that everyone is assuming this is true about them. But it might also still be helpful for them to know there was actually a big gash in the sidewalk where they were doing construction work that I don't think you were aware of, and I was worried about you tripping. And that's why I grabbed you in the moment to prevent that. That helps them to start to rewrite the story. Sometimes, yes, people are treating me as if I'm not capable, and sometimes it's supportive. And now, how do I want people to engage with me? What can I ask or tell you to do next time? And it might be, okay, that was helpful to know. Next time, use your words. Don't touch my body, right? So it helps them to actually start to rewrite the story that everyone does this to, this does happen, it's painful, and there are ways I can ask for a different way to engage with me.
I can just think of so many times when we don't have the words. We can see things, we want to help other people, and we just don't have the right words, or we feel like we don't have the right words. And how often when we don't speak up, whether we're being the one who is thinking we're helping or the one that's being helped, I can see how this could lead to so many misunderstandings because we just don't have, I don't know, is it a feeling of permission to ask something what I'll call a bold question?
It's both a feeling of permission and also in some ways it makes sense that we're all aware now that there's almost this assumption, and this is true when I'm talking about anti-racism, this is true when I'm talking about any kind of anti-oppressive work. One of the hallmarks of the kind of white supremacy culture thinking that has bled into all of these forms of oppression is that you're here to answer my curiosity. You're here in service of me. So if I see you walking down the street, you mentioned that you had lost a lot of the skin on your face, right?
Oh, yeah, it was terrifying looking.
Yeah, so if I'm seeing you walking down the street, why do I think I have the right to understand what's going on with you, right? But we all often think we do. It's like I get to ask you whether or not this is important or painful or challenging for you to talk about. I get to ask you because I'm able-bodied. I don't have a problem. And you're the one who's different. You have to prove yourself. And so it makes sense that we're hesitant to have some of these conversations. And so I say it's always about asking consent. Instead of just saying, hey, what's going on with your face? I could say, I've noticed that there is something happening with your face. I'm curious and I'm open to not hearing about it if that works for you, right? Like let people know, like, of course I'm curious because I'm not pretending that it's not there, that it's not happening. But I also am really clear it's not my right to know this information if you don't want to tell me.
I love that you say that because I was thinking of the number of times, I mean, I'm well aware of what my face looked like back then, but the number of times you could just see it on the tip of their tongue and then they were, and that was almost more awkward than if they just said, hey, I see this on your face. I think that was more awkward, that moment of silence where on the tip of their tongue and you're just kind of waiting.
And wouldn't you love it? Like if someone said, hey, I notice your face looks different. Do you want to share about it or not? And then you could easily say like, yeah, not this time. And then keep going. But at least it's been named. You could move on. Instead of that, should I say something because I can tell they're thinking about it or not?
Exactly. I find that happens oftentimes. Now, I want to just take it a little more tangential. What if we're the observer in the observer role and we see, a conversation or something like that where we feel like maybe we should step in, but we don't know if we should step in? I mean, it's one of those times where I've sometimes observed things and I just don't know where it's going, but maybe intuitively I feel like percentage-wise this may not end good.
Yeah.
What happens when we're in the observer role? When is it okay to step in the observer role?
So there are a couple of tips I have for that. The first is I'm looking at the degree of harm, especially physical harm, right?
Mm-hmm.
If physical harm is happening, I step in. I don't even wait for consent because I just want it to stop. So I step in just enough to stop the physical harm. And then the person, the receiver, the person that is experiencing this action can decide, do they need more from me? But I can just say, hey, that's not okay. You need to stop and stop the physical harm. If it's not physical harm, I check in with the person. But here's the biggest tip. Don't check in and say, wow, that must be so hard for you. Do you need my help? Because the minute you say that, I know that you're seeing me as other. You're saying like, oh, that other person who's not part of my group, who's not sharing my identity is struggling. I'm going to be the savior to help them. I want to know, is it hard for you? Are you okay with what's going on? So if you came to me and said, I'm really uncomfortable what's happening in this moment, would you like me to intervene or do you got this? The person can tell me, no, I got this, I'm okay. Or they can say, yeah, do whatever you want. But I'm making it clear that I'm intervening because of my discomfort, not because there's something wrong with that group experiencing this thing. It's a little bit subtle, so let me add one more piece about this. The difference for me is when someone says, I can't believe you say that. Like the Black folks in the room would be really uncomfortable with that comment because it's really racist. When I hear that, it translates into only Black folks are comfortable. I'm actually okay with it, but I got to speak up for those Black folks. And then I feel sad. Like, are you comfortable with that? Are you not having a problem with what's being said? And it would be so much more supportive for me if I heard you say, you know what? I want everyone in this space to feel included, and I don't feel included when we use this kind of language. I'm part of that then, and I see that we're together. It's not you speaking on my behalf, but you speaking because you see our shared humanity.
I love where the conversation is going, but Roxy, I have to be honest, I am so mesmerized that I am just speechless here. I'm so fascinated by this, and I want to just backtrack a little bit because I can see where the nonviolent communication training is, as well as other things. But I wanted to can you quickly define the nonviolent communication and what that kind of training is so people can understand how language it's the subtleties of language are critically important.
Absolutely. So nonviolent communication is this like great. I like to talk about it more as an approach to living, an approach to thinking about how we are in the world. And so the consciousness of nonviolent communication is the most important. And it says we are all humans with the same needs. Every single human being, regardless of ability, regardless of illness, regardless of ethnic identity, gender, any of these things. We all have the same needs. And we can find connections, we can build community when we assume that anything that you're saying or doing is an attempt to meet those needs. And that if I understood those needs, I can find connection. I can tell you why it's not working for me, what of my needs are not met. And we can work together to support all of us. So it's partly this consciousness that we all have the same needs, but it's also, and this is where the language comes in, it's also an attention to language that helps move us away from blaming or shaming or judging and really focuses on what's the heart, what's the essence of what's true for me, what I'm feeling, and how does it connect to my needs, and what's true for you, what are your feelings, and how does it connect to your needs. So it's both this consciousness about the shared human needs and then the language that we use to get there.
That's beautiful. We need to take a quick commercial break, and when we come back, we'll talk more with Roxy Manning on the anti-racist conversation, as well as anti-ableism and nonviolent communication, and who knows where we'll go. So we'll be right back.
The Autoimmune Hour will return after these messages from our sponsors. It's great sponsors like these that keep this show coming to you every week. Be sure and stop by understandingautoimmune.com to learn more.
Your conscious lifestyle on steroids. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
Hi, it's Olivia Munn with my shelter pets, Frankie and Chance. Say hi, guys. When I adopted them, I discovered that they both have incredible personalities. Chance's sole purpose in life is to love and to be loved. Frankie is a little bit of a scoundrel and always entertaining. They're a little bit of a lot of things, but they're all pure love. Adopt pure love at theshelterpetproject.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council, the Humane Society of the United States, and Maddie's Fund.
OMTimes Magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organization, their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. OMTimes, co-creating a more conscious lifestyle.
Listen and imagine. It takes 5 seconds to send a text, and for those 5 seconds, you're driving blind. Life is worth more than a text. Stay alive. Don't text and drive.
Visit StopTextStopWrecks.org, a message brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, Project Yellow Light, Noise, and the Ad Council.
Hi, this is Sharon, and of course you know me from here on the Autoimmune Hour. Maybe you don't know I'm also an author. My latest book is for kids. It's Pinky Chenille and the Rainbow Hunters, a winner of a 5-star Reader's Favorite Review. It's perfect for your early reader and a great bedtime story for your young adventurers. Check it out over at pinkychenille.com. That's PinkyChenille.com. See you there.
Research shows we apologize up to 10 times a day, and most of the time, we say sorry as a response to someone else's mistake. What if we thanked people instead of all that unnecessary apologizing? So instead of saying, sorry, I'm rambling, you say, thank you for listening. Join us at ProjectForgive.com, a free, non-religious resource on global forgiveness.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Autoimmune Hour. I'm Sharon Sayler from SharonSayler.com, and pop over to understandingautoimmune.com to find even more episodes just as wonderful as this one. I am so in love with Roxy and her work, and her latest book is How to Have Antiracist Conversations, and she also co-wrote The Anti-Racist Heart with Sarah Payton, a multi-time guest on our show, which we all love Sarah, and now I'm absolutely in love with Roxy here. So I have to be honest with everyone. You know, I've sort of been blown away. If you follow the show at all, you know I'm a word nerd and I geek out on all things language. And I have just been taking so many notes on Roxy's approach to conversations and approach to life. We've been talking about nonviolent communication and all the shared human needs and how we can have those conversations, especially around anti-racism. And I want to take it a little tangential to talk about how other ways people might bump into this. Have you had any experiences where you found, like, I'll say where there's hidden things? Like, I know now that my skin is back, I still have issues, but they're invisible to most people. So how do we talk about when people have what I'll call invisible experiences?
Yeah, this is really kind of dear to my heart because I have a lot of visible and invisible differences, right? Like right now, because I'm on the phone, I'm wearing my headset, or on Zoom rather, you can't tell that I wear a cochlear implant and I wear a hearing aid. And there are a lot of times when I am moving in group settings, and being deaf, being hard of hearing is still very new for me. So there are a lot of times when I'm moving in these settings where I have needs. I'm really clear on what my needs are. For connection, for inclusion, for full participation in some of the dialogues that are happening, and I don't even name them. I'm afraid to name them almost because it bumps into the stories that we often have around, well, that's too much. I'm asking too much. I'm a burden on other people. And on the other side, when people are interacting with me, there's almost this idea that, well, we're attending to the needs of the majority. well, what does that mean? If I'm only taking into account the needs of the majority, that means that immediately some people are not included. Some people's needs are not included. And when we add in the layer of how vulnerable it is to speak our needs when our conditions are invisible, then we're even less likely to have the support, to have the inclusion and belonging that we want. And so I run into this all the time, like just how do I navigate the different identities I have? Another one is my size, right? I'm a large woman. And I remember teaching in France. And when I walked into the setting, I looked at the chairs and I said, ooh, I'm not feeling comfortable with these chairs. I don't actually trust that these chairs will hold my body. And I was too afraid to say I'm not happy with these chairs. And I eventually spoke up and they brought in chairs for pretty much everyone that were more comfortable, were wider, were sturdier. It was great. But then on the last day, they decided to take all the chairs away and to put out these really cheap folding chairs again because it would help the facility to change, to turn over for the next group. And I didn't speak up. I didn't have a sense that my needs were being included, and I didn't know how to bring them to the forefront again. And I sat in a chair and it collapsed under me.
Oh, no.
Yeah. And you could imagine just like how much complexity came up. Anger, shame, self-judgment. So many different things came up in that moment. And so this idea of like, how do we really attend to the need? Both the needs that are clear, obvious, the needs that we're aware of because we're members of that group, and how do we find out the needs of people who we're not sharing an identity with, not sharing an experience with, and include those as well?
How do we? I don't want to offend someone in a group and point out, say, are there invisible things? I'm thinking of if I'm teaching a class or something, how would I present it? How would I open up the conversation? Are there any, I don't know, are there any invisible needs? Sounds a little intrusive or a little...
Well, actually, I don't actually believe it is, because one of the challenges we have is that we have not normalized talking about these things. Why would it be a challenge to say, hey, who needs support for hearing? Who needs support for vision? Who needs support for anything? Like, it's only a challenge because we still have it as it's too much, it's a burden, it's a shame. We shouldn't talk about these things. So the more we explicitly ask, the more normalized it becomes. And I'm doing a training in a few weeks in Germany, and I've asked it included on the questionnaire that participants fill out before they even arrive. It's just a sentence that says, are there any accessibility or identity needs that you would like us to be aware of? And they get to say, it could be something like, and we get a range of responses. It could be, I'm hearing impaired. I would love it if we have a practice of everyone using a microphone, right? And that we stop when people start speaking without the microphone. To something like, I feel a little bit uncertain being vulnerable in front of white folks. We have some groups that are affinity groups where I trust that I'm going to be received. So just opening up the space and making it normal, easy, and that we're asking it of everyone, not just the people who we think might share an identity, is also part of what makes it normal. That it's normal for everyone to name what they need and not to assume that we know.
I love that. Can we make like that a rule, worldwide rule?
Yes.
Because two sides of that. I think I'm a little bit uncomfortable asking the question because I don't want to put anybody on the spot where they might have to raise their hand and say, I'm hearing impaired, or, I'm sight impaired, or English isn't my first language, or, whatever it is. So for me, it's kind of twofold. I'm hesitant to ask the question, but also worried that, okay, I don't want to feel like somebody has to speak up, like they're like having to say whatever it is that maybe they're not comfortable saying whatever it is. Maybe they're uncomfortable letting people know that they struggle with something like hearing or sight or...
Yes. So whenever possible, like, when we ask people to register for workshops or talks, they fill in their name. Just add that other question. It's like one more thing for them to fill in.
I love that. You've solved the problem before the problem ever arose.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then I do want to say, though, that sometimes you do walk into a venue and it's like people just gathered and you didn't get to do this pre-question ahead of time. And I think it's super okay to say, I want to make sure that we include all of the different strategies that will support everyone in getting the most out of it. So either, just everyone call out, what do you think will support everyone in being inclusive? So now it's not just, I am hearing impaired, I have to speak up with that. If I just say, anybody call out some practices that will support everyone, somebody else might say, oh, let's make sure that we use microphones. And it's like it becomes a group sourcing, a group crowdsourcing, rather than the burden of just the folks who are there.
That's fantastic. I love that concept because I do a lot of public speaking, and I have to be honest, I don't think I've ever asked that question. I know I've never asked that question, but I've talked on the show multiple times about the problems with invisible illnesses. You've got a disabled placard for your car. You get out of the disabled parking place and someone looks at you and says, you don't deserve that. You don't deserve that parking spot, without even, other than they see you get out of a car without tremendous problem. The moment, in those 30 seconds of you getting out of a car, they make this vast assumption whether you deserve that placard or not.
Mm-hmm. I remember just reading some dialogue that was happening online around whether or not younger folk should give up their seats on the bus or public transportation for elderly folks. And a lot of young folks kept writing in and saying, you can't tell that I have a disability. You're just looking at my age. And that's just one aspect of me. But I have an invisible disability and I can't stand that long. Or I have fatigue. I can't stand this long. And I want to be trusted that if I'm doing this, it's not because I'm rude. It's not because I'm, one of those selfish young folks, but just assume what is it that I don't know rather than making assumptions.
Oh, and let's flip that over. I have gray hair and I can stand. I mean, I'm not needing you to give up your seat. And so that I find that's kind of that two-way street of.
Absolutely.
Oftentimes somebody will be very kind and give up their seat, but sometimes I'd actually just rather stand. I've been sitting all day at my computer and the standing is rather nice at that moment to thank them for the gesture, but I'm okay.
Yeah, I've had those kinds of things on the BART. BART is our train here where I live, where I'm trying to give my seat to someone and they're trying to give my seat. I'm like, no, I don't need it. And we're both making assumptions about each other and what the other person needs. So, yeah.
Okay, so all of these things, I'm just thinking of how many times with just a few simple, loving, heartfelt, curious questions, so many of these talking on eggshell problems could be put to rest fairly quickly.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I'm just thinking out loud here, because even if we take this beyond, I'm thinking just of how many times we assume people that we've known a long time, or maybe even family members, we begin to make assumptions about them without ever rechecking in, or our friends. If you had met me when I got my diagnosis, I was completely in a different place than I am now.
Yes, it's like we see each other as static. Whatever picture I form of you, whatever image I take, in the moment I meet you becomes the picture I look at all the time. And I never revisit, I never recheck. I remember I had an aneurysm a long time ago, and it's really interesting. I always feel like if odd saying this because I'm like, oh, I'm sounding conceited, but I'm really smart. I was tested as gifted a long time ago. And then I had a brain aneurysm that turned into a hemorrhagic stroke, and I was not as smart anymore, right? I lost some function, and people don't know that. And so my sense of myself changed. And people kept expecting me to be able to do exactly the things that I always did, to have the kind of same fluidity and quickness of response that I didn't see as being there anymore. And so there's something about both noticing, are we updating our image of ourselves in addition to are other people actually responding to who we are in this moment, not who they used to know?
Right. For me, besides the skin, it was profound muscle weakness. So yes, there was a time that I couldn't walk from here to there. I couldn't do certain things. And I know it's coming from love. And as we're continuing on a little bit longer walk, are you okay? Are you okay? So, yeah, I'm fine.
One of the complexities when I hear that story, it's also because I also have some disabilities around movement, and it's not constant. And so it's also this moment okay, sometimes I'm way better than I was. Sometimes I can go for these really long walks, but you might get me on a day when I'm in pain and I can't. And it's also, how can I show up? How can we, as the individuals with these disabilities, and for me, I'm talking about this with people I'm in relationship with, not necessarily strangers, but how can I let you know how I would like to be checked in with? So it could be something like, I don't want you to ask me if I'm okay with walking further. I want you to trust that I will honor my body and take care of myself. But if I tell you that I can't, I also don't want you to tell me, come on, you need a little bit more exercise, you need a little bit more. It's really about, I want you to trust what I'm telling you I need. And that is such a big, hard, difficult thing for us to do sometimes.
I think it is. When you said that, I've said things like that before, and then people get defensive. And so then now my current status with some of those people that got defensive are, okay, I just don't say anything.
Yeah.
I don't want to go through that again. Are there ways that when you know from previous experience that maybe it wasn't as graceful a conversation as it could have been? I'm assuming from what I've heard so far, and check me if I'm wrong, but keep having those conversations.
Yes. Keep having those conversations. And I like to talk about the difference between what I'm asking of folks who are impacted and folks who are not, right? So if I have the capacity as a person who's impacted, who's holding certain identities, I get to decide, do I want to have this conversation with you? And how much of it do I want to focus on your experience versus focusing on mine? So I could imagine, like you said, sometimes people respond with defensiveness. If I have the capacity, I would actually just say, I noticed that when I said that, you started like saying things about what your intentions were, what you were wanting from me. And I'm actually curious, like, what are you telling yourself I meant when I said that? Or are you thinking that I have judgments about you when I'm saying I want to be trusted for being able to honor my body? What's coming up for you when you hear that? And have them really reflect and think about, like, why is that a problem for them? And I might offer empathy if there's something coming up, like, oh, people tell me I'm not caring enough, I'm trying to be, and now I'm being told that I'm being too intrusive. If I have the capacity, I can empathize with them. And if not, I can say, I can see why that's a struggle, and I don't have the energy to hold that with you right now. Are you willing to just honor my request and know that it's not coming from any judgment about you, right? So continue to have those conversations. And for the folks on the other side, I'll just really briefly say, if you notice you're feeling defensive, go get support elsewhere. Don't put it on the person who's already impacted to be the one to have to support you, to be the one to help you unpack what's going on. If they ask, sure. But if not, just say, I'm getting defensive. That's a good sign that I need to go do some work and get some support.
I'm thinking to myself how often, even with all my desires and my training and things like that, in those moments where I'm getting defensive, I have to be honest with myself. That's not always the easiest thing to say to myself, like, stop. Sometimes it just, I don't know what it is. The little inner child is trying to prove something.
Yeah. Well, that inner child, like, you've mentioned having Sharon on for several episodes. That inner child is probably struggling with some of these vows, right? I will do no harm. And all of a sudden, this moment, you're going, I did something that someone's telling me might have caused harm. And so that kicks up. And we want to take care of ourselves. We need to soothe ourselves. We need proof that we didn't transgress against this vow. And it's being able to say, and if you can, it's so powerful to say out loud, I notice I'm being defensive. I'm going to stop myself and come back to this later. And just like give yourself permission to say that out loud and then not have to do anything else with it with this person. It helps to kind of do a graceful changing away from the topic. And then this is a place I need to do some work.
There was something, as I heard you say that, just the words came out. There was something very freeing that happened. And I'm not right now in a moment that I think I'm defensive, but it was interesting just how powerful those words are, just hearing them and being able to take them in and go, wow, that is really a releasing statement.
Yeah, it prevents us from having to stay stuck on the strain that's not working for us. You could be like, oh, no, this is a defensive train. I'm going to step off for a moment, right? So freeing.
I love the metaphor, the defensive train. I have a longtime mentor and friend, Shelley Rochervate. She always talks about, with conversations, meet people at their bus stop and then travel together where you want to go. I love these travel metaphors. So we're just down to about the last 6 minutes, and I want to give you some final thoughts. Maybe I haven't asked a question you've just really been asked before and would love to share. Or
one of the thoughts that's coming up for me is just like really, really inviting in self-compassion, because these conversations are difficult no matter what our identity is. They require vulnerability. They require us almost risking this idea that we're going to belong, that we're going to still be in relationship with somebody after we name the difficult things, either what's not working for us or naming, I think I've done something that might have been painful for you, right? And so hold yourself with a lot of self-compassion and realize that even if you don't show up in the moment, if right now you did something, you realize I did not show up in the way that I rode that defensive train to the last stop, right? That you get to do it over. You get to come back the next day, the next month, the next year and say, I've been thinking about this conversation we had, and I realized that it might have had an impact I didn't want to have, and I didn't show up in the way that I wanted. Do you want to revisit that, or would you rather let it go? Still giving the person choice, but recognizing you get to do it over. You get to ask. You get to ask for permission to do it over. And that is also freeing.
A quick tangential question is that what happens if obviously you know you've done something, but replaying the videotape in your head, you don't know what you did? Is there a way someone, I am sorry, I could tell there's been a break in our relationship, whatever, how do you say that?
It's two pieces. First, exactly what you were saying, right? I'm playing back our conversation in my head and how we've been relating after. And I think there was something I said or did or some way I showed up that's impacted our relationship. And if there was, I want to know. I really want to. And I'm committing to hearing you without defensiveness, just hearing you without having any rebuttals. Say that. But even before you do that, I often tell people, especially when it's around race, when it's around ableism, things like this, there are enough people out there who are committed to educating us in this work. So go to one of those people and say, hey, I had this conversation with somebody. I think something went wrong and I can't understand why. Can you help me figure it out? So go to somebody who's committed to supporting in these spaces. It could be an online forum, all of these places, and get somebody to help you unpack what happened. Because then you can go to that person and say, you know, that conversation we had, I wonder if it was an example of, for instance, centering whiteness. And it landed really hard for you. And if it was, I'd want to hear more.
I'd love to delve into this idea of how do we know that we're choosing the right form or group or person to support us on our journey? When you said online forum, I felt a little twinge of like, oh my goodness, that's just so, too wide open for me. Like to know that I'm choosing the right. What are some tips you have to choose help wisely?
So I do a number of things. Like whenever I'm looking at an online source, I look at who's connected to that source because you learn a lot about people by the company they keep, right? So I kind of look and see who's endorsing this, who's there. If it's something about anti-racism, are there any global majority folks affiliated with this? And if they are, what are their messages? Do I like how they're talking about race? So you still have a little bit of an echo chamber, but at least I know like this is consistent with my values or not consistent with my values. So that's one of the things that I look for. I also look at what's the quality of the discourse that I see happening in this group? Is there like a shutting down, stamping out, shaming of anybody who questions any of the premises? Or is there engagement? Is there a true willingness to educate and to explicate some of the reasons why we have these different points of views? And all of these are clues that I look for, whether or not this is a group that is really just, like I said, an echo chamber for like this really toxic thought or something where we're really encouraging inquiry and engagement.
Great tips. I always get a little nervous because I think about algorithms that you start searching for something and then it kind of feeds you down a rabbit hole. Maybe that rabbit hole wasn't the one you wanted to go down.
Absolutely.
Well, we're down to the last 3 minutes. Shocking. Tell everyone about your books, where to get them. And I know you have great programs and things. So please, shameless self-promote here. We want to know more.
So shameless self-promotion. Thank you. I have these 2 new books that are out. They were released on August 29th. And the first book is How to Have Antiracist Conversations, Embracing Our Full Humanity to Challenge White Supremacy. And the second book is The Anti-Racist Heart that I co-wrote with your favorite guest, Sarah Payton. And both of the books are available pretty much at any bookseller worldwide, I'm hearing right now. And you can find out more about the books, watch some trailers, and pretty soon we'll have some classes up where you can see us talk about the content in the book on our website, antiracistconversations.com. So that's where you can learn about both books. If you want to learn more about me and the work that I do, see some of my upcoming classes, I have a class coming up on how to talk about how to have anti-racist conversations and how to deal with microaggressions. And we'll also have a couple of classes that are very much geared to the books. You can go to my website, roxannemanning.com. And Yeah, that's kind of my shameless self-promotion right now.
Now, I have to add, I'm in love with Fierce Conversations. Please promote your podcast with Sarah. Some podcast everybody has to listen. So
Absolutely. Thank you for naming that. It's also a brand new venture for us, and it's been so exciting. Sarah and I decided to interview people who are doing work that we think is really working towards anti-racism, but in ways that expand our concept of what it means to be an activist. So folks who are not just protesting, although we have some of those folks, we love those folks, but also folks who are maybe artists. We have artists, musicians, philosophers, people who are working in corporate organizations, like a whole gamut of people who are just doing amazing anti-racist work to profile what does it mean to show up and do this work. And our podcast is called Fierce Compassion. We drop a new episode every 2 weeks, and you can find that podcast on our website, antiracistconversations.com, and then click on the podcast link.
apologies. Fierce Compassion. Maybe I liked Fierce Conversations too.
Fierce Compassionate Conversations. There we go.
Oh, there we go. But it's a fantastic podcast. We'll have that up at Understanding Auto, link to that, and a link to both Roxy's site, her personal site, as well as the book sites. Everyone, thank you. First, Roxy, thank you for joining us. It's been a delight. And like I said, I've been mesmerized this whole time. We'll have to have you back because everyone knows that I'm just a languaging nerd. So that's my other job. I know, guys. But the community puts up with it. And everyone, have a great week. Whatever your adventures, join me next week for another brand new episode. Enjoy.
The information provided on the Autoimmune Hour, Understanding Autoimmune, and Life Interrupted Radio, including the websites understandingautoimmune.com and lifeinterruptedradio.com, plus social media, is for educational purposes only. What you read, hear, and see on the Autoimmune Hour, Understanding Autoimmune, and Life Interrupted Radio, and its websites, and other media outlets is based on experience only. The information should never be used for any legal, diagnostic, or treatment purposes.
For the next few minutes, we'll be providing a guided meditation. Meditation is a positive way to help reset your day and does require specific, targeted attention and focus. Please do not drive or operate machinery during this time. As we say here, drive when you drive and meditate when you meditate.
In the next few moments, take a nice, deep breath. Oh, and let it out with a sigh. Shake out your fingers, and your arms, and your shoulders. And keep breathing, enjoying that breath as you kind of shake it all out. Let it go. Just look around a little bit right now, wherever you are. Notice what you're grateful for. Could be anything. Could even be the color of the sky today, the sweet smell of the flowers, the breeze on your face, the people you're with, the place you're at. Could be anything and everything. Wow. Take stock of a few things maybe that you don't see right now, but you're grateful for. Maybe it's somebody in your life that isn't here with you now. Some place. That's right. Shake everything out and just take stock of that gratitude list that we're building. That's right. Just shake it out. Shake everything out and continue to add to that gratitude list that you're building. That's right. Wow. Quite a list. That's right. What are you grateful for about yourself? Add that to this growing gratitude list. Don't be shy. Don't be humble. Come on. take a moment right now, starting at the top of that list. Remember, those were the things that you saw right there near you. And count them down, anchoring each one with a beautiful breath. Number 1. Number 2. Continue on down your list of the things that are right there with you. Anchoring each one with a breath and let it out with a sigh. Allowing enough time to get through the whole list right now. Now start with the list for yourself. Begin to list those things you're grateful for about yourself and anchor each one with a nice, deep breath. Just right. That's right. Even being grateful for this moment right here, right now, feeling every bit of you alive and well, feeling healing and soothing and calming energy just tingle throughout you. Getting stronger with each breath as your gratitude begins to grow. Wow, what a list. What a lucky person. Oh, that's right. Wow. And coming right back now, full of energy, happy to be here, and feeling grateful. Oh, wow. Welcome back. Go in gratitude and enjoy your day.